Hello and welcome to the Peak Experience, the podcast from Peak Support. This is a podcast where we talk about the agent experience, the customer experience, all the ways those two things interconnect. And really excited to be here today with Michael Bair. He's the former SVP for customer experience at Figs. And he grew that support team from 12 people to 170 people. So I'm really excited to talk with him today about that whole process, challenges he encountered along the way, and how he maintained an exceptional customer experience during that time. So Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. So to get started, why don't you just talk a little bit about how you got to Figs and what the customer support team was like when you got there?
Sure. Yeah. So my career has really had like three different parts, but it's been all customer facing teams. So I started out my career in financial sales, working for a really large bank, doing consumer lending, and was in a very traditional sales role, so inside sales, and then moved into sales management. And then got the opportunity to go work for an energy startup, which is a bit of an odd transition, but energy and banking are surprisingly somewhat similar. And that was the first time I got to run a customer experience team. And because I had sales experience, it was a lot of retention type work. And so, my skills kind of translated really well there. It was a great experience. That company ended up exiting while I was there. And there was a group of us who left to kind of start a different company called Inspire. And that was a really great experience. I was a very early stage employee there, got to hire the whole customer experience, which we called member experience there. I ran inside sales for them as well, and eventually ended up running sales quality. And that was a really great experience. It was also successful, and then ended up exiting in 2021. I did a 1-year stint running a big customer success team for a vertical SaaS company in LA called Service Titan. And then in 2020, went to Figs, which was my first e-commerce role. And there I ran customer experience and B2B sales.
Got it. And for folks who don't know, maybe they haven't been to the doctor in the last 10 years, talk about Figs. What is Figs, and why has it resonated so much with its customer base?
Yeah. Figs is a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company that sells medical apparel. So very specifically like scrubs, lab coats, jackets. We had a partnership with New Balance for shoes. But yeah, most people would be surprised. 1 out of 11 Americans work in some form of healthcare. Not all wear medical apparel or scrubs by that matter, but it's a really big sector. Also, at the time when Figs was launched 10, 11 years ago, everything was pretty generic. There was unisex sizing. There was no fabric innovation. The way that people bought products was really a poor experience as well. And so Figs really revolutionized a lot of that, and a lot of the things that athleisure wear companies did for kind of the exercise community 20 years ago, Figs did for the healthcare apparel space 10, 11 years ago. So that was probably one of the more exciting parts about my time there, was getting to meet customers in real life, because they were always very excited to know that you worked at Figs and couldn't wait to tell you how much they loved the company.
Yeah, I remember hearing about it early on. It must have been 10 years ago or so. And it was just, it was, like you said, very revolutionary. On one hand, so obvious. Yes, of course, there's millions of these medical professionals, and they want to be comfortable and look good at work too, just like everyone else. But it was this segment of the market that just, had not been customer driven, hadn't been focused on the customer. And so Figs saw this incredible opening and came in and has really dominated ever since.
Yeah. And I think largely because it is a direct consumer business, it's super close to all of the customers. That was a big part of my role there. We heard directly from customers what they wanted, what they loved, what they didn't love. And we were able to use that in our products and our experiences to make them better every day.
So yeah, talk about that. Because that's one of the areas, kind of the main focus of what I wanted to dig in with you is how does Figs do that? How do they stay connected to their customers, even despite the fact, even though they're online, even though most of those relationships are largely digital? How do they learn from customers? How do they bring those insights back to inform the product?
Yeah, I can kind of share how I think Figs does it, and then also just some other examples from my past. When you're a direct consumer company, you're not selling on marketplaces, you're not selling through wholesalers, which are going to really control and own the customer relationships. When you're a direct consumer, you own those customer relationships. And so every interaction that you're going to have with a customer is largely going to happen even on your website or on your app. The ways they're going to interact with your brand very physically or through social media, through your customer experience team and all of the different channels that you might offer there. Maybe pop-ups or short-term events that you might do, but you're going to have, and we had, at my time at Figs, just endless direct customer interaction. And so we also really build a lot of trust with our customers. And I think that's the other thing that direct consumer companies can do really well is build a lot of trust with them, that we're listening to what you're saying. We want to know what you love, what you don't love, what you want us to change, and we can make those changes. I saw that very similarly at Service Titan. That company, we built software for the trades, so like plumbing, HVAC, electrician companies. And so, because we were building for those very specific customers, we had such close relationships with all of them, like the things that they needed our software to do for them, whether it was running their dispatch, their CRM, their accounting, their inventory. Like we had really close relationships at every touch point, from sales to onboarding to success to support, to make sure that we were hearing their feedback, implementing it, and really having a process where that feedback is heard every single day. So yeah, I think different than most retailers or most companies, where if they use an intermediary or a third party to sell or distribute their products, we were directly interacting with customers, and that made the world of difference.
So what were some of those processes? Were customer support agents asking certain questions on every call? And how do you make sure that customers really use it? Because I think a lot of companies say we want your feedback, but that doesn't mean they actually get it. Or you mentioned that word trust. Customers don't necessarily trust that their feedback is going to be heard. So what were some of those processes you used on the customer support team or elsewhere to make sure that you were getting those insights and that customers were actually heard, that they were used, the insights were used?
Yeah, one of the first things I did at Figs, and I've done it at a couple of different companies, is really start to build out the voice of the customer program. And at Figs, that looked like three big pillars. One was definitely the customer experience interaction. So emails, calls, chats, text messages, social media. We were a big social media brand, so we got a lot of feedback that way. And then we had a host of surveys that went out to customers. And so it's really like building out a process where all of that feedback is coming in and you're able to like do something with it. So there's some like structural things that you need to have in place, the way that you have your contact center platform built out, what fields are you capturing from people. Same thing on the surveys, like making sure that the surveys are really built out. You can capture all of the properties. Every survey response you get, you know exactly who that customer is. You can tie it back to like all of their purchases, all of their history. Social media is a little bit tougher because a lot of that has just some built-in anonymity to it, but still trying to figure out who those people are as best you can. So there's like a structural component to it. The other big component is like a cultural component. You asked, did we have like questions that we asked the team? Yes, we had like programs and we had QA measures and processes in place where every time we launched new products, anytime we had new initiatives going on, the team was incentivized, coached, managed, like held accountable for getting feedback for that. And so what we really created there is like what I've often referred to as a feedback flywheel. Customers gave us feedback. We implemented it into our products, into our experiences. We told customers that we did that. And so we built trust with customers so that the next time they would give us more. And just eventually that flywheel starts to spin and spin and spin. And people tell you. And I think that was like, a really meaningful difference in our business. And again, like, I saw this at a couple different places where the customers just really start to build a lot of your business for you. They tell you very specifically what features, what aspects of the garment, what buttons in the software, what makes them love it, what makes them willing to tell their friends and family and refer you and buy more, and what are things that are like detractors. So I think building in those like structural pieces are super important. And I see this like pretty consistently in my consulting practice today, where a lot of people don't have like the infrastructure in place. Like they don't have the contact center, even categories or reasons, or they're not capturing the data they need to. And then they're also just not ingesting it or warehousing it so that you could even query it if you wanted to. but then there's also just that lack of like cultural piece that they've not
Yeah.
established on the team, and therefore the customers don't really expect it either. And so
Right.
all you end up hearing in those situations are the things that people hate or
Mm-hmm.
people don't like. And I think that's like where kind of the customer experience, voice of the customer programs kind of fall apart, because they just end up being all the
Mm-hmm.
things that are wrong with it.
Right.
And you
Right.
never
Right.
hear actually what people love. And that was like something that I always really tried to focus on, is like, yes, we want to know what people don't love and they want us to fix, but like even more importantly, like what are the things
Yeah.
they love? Like what is the reasons you are buying these products or services?
Yeah.
And how do we do more of that?
Yeah. I love the idea of actually incentivizing agents to provide
Yeah.
it, because I think one of the challenges in the customer service industry, especially if you're using a BPO, which I know you do, a business process outsourcer, or you did at Figs, is I think a lot of times agents come, and we face this at Peak Support, where a lot of times agents come from larger BPOs where their feedback wasn't really wanted.
Yeah.
And though that input and those suggestions and that proactivity was not valued, and if anything, it might have been punished.
Yeah.
So there are some habits there that we at Peak Support are often kind of working to undo. And I love the idea of actually just directly rewarding them for it. How did you do that? Was it a kind of regular monthly incentive, or was it more of a competition? How did you do that?
Yeah. So one of the things that starting out my career in sales did for me is it really made me understand the value of variable compensation.
Yeah.
So I think probably one of the biggest differences that I've done over my career is I always had variable compensation for every team I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
That includes all of the customer experience, customer support teams that I've managed. And through that, yeah, you can really, like, I'm a big sticks and carrots person. Like, I really think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the focus and the accountability and responsibility that you want to get from people can be really managed through aligned goals that also like tie in with some kind of like compensation piece to the person's role.
Yeah.
So every team I've had has had a monthly compensation. There's criteria. It's usually nothing crazy, 5, 6, 7 different pieces, different levels of tier attainment that they can get, and then they get a monthly bonus based on those. And we would have things like in place where, we might have 1 month a focus on gathering proactive feedback on kind of experiential pieces. There might be a month where we're focused on certain product launches and getting feedback on that, and then just building in forms, building in trackers where you can gather all of that stuff, and yeah, being able to like then report on it. It's really difficult to have any kind of meaningful feedback that you can share with your physical product or digital product teams if it's just like 10, 15, 20 pieces of feedback. You really want to get to a place where you have hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces that you can really start to share with them, because that's the stuff that's really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think just building that into your goals, building it into your quality assurance programs, building it into your compensation if you have that option, can really like move that needle.
Yeah. And tell me, what was the rough breakdown by channel? How many of these interactions are happening? Phone, email, chat, social media?
Yeah, I've seen it all over the place. So like at Figs, largely because it's an e-commerce company, it was like 2/3 emails. But then, in my prior role at Inspire, where that was a clean energy company, 90% of all of our interactions were over the phone.
Yeah.
So a
So I
lot of
feel
that is
like
very
it's harder
industry
to do
specific.
that on email. It's easier on phone or even chat where there's a conversation. Were
Yeah.
agents able to get feedback on email as well? Just resolve the ticket and then say, by the way, do you have any feedback on the product? Or, how do you work it in?
Yeah, I think so. Most interactions, like I'm sure, it depends on like really the type of interaction, but like very few tickets are like a one response solve.
Yeah.
And so, if you're going to have to go back to the customer for something,
Mm-hmm.
being able to just kind of like squeeze that question in there. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people especially like nowadays, use email almost like text messaging, where it's just like
Mm-hmm.
quick interactions and they're kind of on the
Right.
go, particularly like the customer base we had at Figs, where they were busy,
Right.
they were constantly
Yeah.
going from shift to shift, they had very long shifts.
Yeah. And they're not at their computer necessarily. They're not sitting down at a computer for 8 hours
Yeah,
taking care
yeah.
of this.
A lot of e-commerce is impulse buying, and
Mm-hmm.
impulse buying typically happens on people's phones.
Yeah.
And so, the way they buy your product can also be the way that they ask for support, or the way
Yeah.
they kind of have like a post-purchase experience. So a lot of the post-purchase experiences that we were putting in place like had to be mobile optimized because this was how they were going to interact with us. So I think you can squeeze in those questions. You're not going to get a response every single time, just like you know you ask for it on the phone or chat, you might not get a response every single time, but if you have the practice of doing it regularly, and again, like this requires like trust with the customers, it requires that like good relationships with the customers so that they don't feel like you're you know dismissing their core issue. You can be really successful at that.
Were you using AI? How are you thinking about AI?
I mean, in platform, it's kind of always been there. So you know, there's plenty of tools, particularly like product feedback tools, surveying tools that were already doing, you know, some machine learning, you know, some light AI stuff. Obviously, a lot of that changed a year ago with OpenAI's release. But yeah, using that stuff to categorize contact reasons, find trends in the data, find insights. I think that is one of the most exciting parts about AI, particularly in the customer feedback, voice of the customer world. Is you know, and you know, if you just think about like social media channels, particularly if you have a very strong social brand, you know, it's just really difficult to manage the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of interactions a month that you're going to have there. And having AI being able to read all of those and really synthesize that data and tell you what you're looking for, could be really exciting. I still think this is something to be determined. I still haven't seen a tool that does this like perfectly across all the different mediums. Like there's ones that are maybe good just for surveys, or ones that are just good for contact center platforms, but something that can combine all of the customer feedback channels could be really exciting.
And I our feeling is within 5 years, you're going to have much more comprehensive solutions. The CRMs are going to have all of these capabilities embedded, and those capabilities are actually going to work. In the meantime, it's probably going to be a little bit of a patchwork of pulling third-party tools together, along with whatever tools companies are using. What do you think about AI for actual customer interaction? Is that something you did at Figs? Is that something you think can work for a very customer-focused e-commerce company?
So I have a lot of thoughts about it. My consulting practice, I'm working with a couple AI chatbot companies right now and really trying to help them figure out like what their offering is. I think there's two fundamental things that have to be solved before I think this could be mass adopted. First, and most importantly, is end consumers resoundingly don't like chatbots. There's endless surveys you can read where 80-90% of people have no interest in talking with a chatbot. And some of that, if not a lot of it, is because of the historic experience with chatbots. Like pre-ChatGPT 4, chatbots probably were pretty terrible. And that's everyone's experience. You end up in these terrible loops. They don't understand what you're saying. And it's just like, it's just endless. It's very clear that consumers do not like these. And so if you're a business and you actually care what your customers think or what consumers think, why would you then put a chatbot in front of them that they've already kind of resoundingly told you they don't want? For all of the Klarna press releases in the world, there are just endless examples where people don't want these. So I think that's
and Klarna, just for folks who don't know, they put out a big press release. I don't remember, maybe 6 months ago now, maybe even more, where that they had, I think, eliminated 700 positions or something like that because of AI. But now, have you tried Klarna's customer support? That's the question.
I'm not personally. I'm not a customer.
How has it worked for their customers? Whenever I'm talking about this topic with a group of people, I ask, has anyone had a good interaction with AI that they would like to share with the group? You don't get a lot of examples. There's still a lot of bad AI that's just a lot like it was pre-ChatGPT.
I think there's some businesses like that just have an unmanageable volume of interactions that can spike it at odd times. That just naturally have really high contact rates. So your Instacarts of the world, Uber, American Airlines, there are businesses there that, regardless of whether customers want them or not, this probably is going to have to be a solution for them, because the spikiness of their business, just like it's going to be always difficult to manage.
Or social
Um,
media companies, for example, a company like Facebook essentially offers no support to its users
yeah,
because you're not paying. You're not paying
yeah,
anything. But sometimes, as a user, you really need support.
yeah,
I mean, you can have a pretty critical issue,
yeah,
and so that can be incredibly frustrating. So I think
yeah,
for companies like that have millions of
yeah,
non-paying users, AI is certainly better than the current solution.
yeah. If there's nothing there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what Klarna's situation was.
Yeah.
Also, fintech's also very different,
Right, right,
but
right. Right. Not saying it. I have not tried Klarna's, but
yeah,
I think a lot of e-commerce companies too have found. It sounds like this was maybe not the case at Figs, but that a lot of those contacts are what the so-called simple tickets, and so a lot of e-commerce companies have had success automating those one-touch responses, the "where is my order" questions. We have a client who we optimized their chatbot and have a 96% chatbot resolution rate with 97% customer satisfaction. So when you've got a lot of those simple tickets, I think the chatbots can be very successful. It's just
yeah,
when it gets a little harder than that, it's tough for AI to make the leap.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true. Yeah, the other thing that I think will be really interesting to see is, so outside of like the customer perception of AI chatbots and whether they want to use them or not, is that a medium that customers want to see, that they want to use to resolve their issues?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these like simple tier one basic inquiries should actually be answered in existing mediums. Like there are
Yeah,
self-serve
correct.
tools, there are account management tools,
Yeah,
there are emails that people are sending every single day that actually should have the ability to just like the cancel order, where's my order ticket? Like
yeah,
there should just be buttons for all that stuff, and like good
yeah,
companies actually have this
yeah,
stuff already in place. So like
exactly.
if I were a consumer, I would be really wondering like, well, why would I have to go into your chatbot experience? Why would I have to
Right.
use that medium when these other mediums should already exist?
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing that'd be really interesting, and I don't know how this is going to play out. Is like as the world moves more to, and it's already like heavily on mobile. Do people want to be chatting? Like if you pull up your phone and you go to a company's website and you bring up their chatbot and it's in your whole window, is that really how I want to resolve my issues?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that plays into the really strong negative sentiment that people have about chatbots, is like the
Yeah.
usability and the UX of it as well. But I think those two big pieces are still
Yeah.
very TBD before this is like mass adopted, even as much as CEOs across and CFOs across the world want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to get back to the customer support team. And you talked a lot about how you got product feedback from the customer support team. Talk about your approach to customer support generally. How did Figs is known for its customer experience. How do you build a system, training, hiring the right people to be really delivering a high level of customer support?
Yeah,
What are some of the techniques you used at Figs that worked really well for
sure.
driving that quality and customer satisfaction?
Yeah, I really think of it as like I call them the three P's of great customer experience. It ends up being more than three, but I make it work. The first is people. The second is policies, procedures, and process, and then the third is platforms. And so
Okay.
on the first thing on people, the most like I have tons of thoughts on this, but like one of the most fundamental things is hiring what I call you only hire people with PhDs, passionate, hungry, and driven. And
Mm,
so the people that are interacting with your brand or interacting with your customers have to be passionate about it. They have to be like hungry to work hard and really like driven to deliver a great customer experience. And so at Figs, at Inspire, at ServiceSite, and at every company I ever worked for, I just had a super high bar for the people that could interact with customers. I just did not view it as an entry level job, and I really ensured that we were getting not only the best people to interact with customers today, but the best people that would be working for the company and for the brand for the long term. And so I've seen that across my time is we hired the best people. They learned customer experience. They learned who our customers are, what products we serve,
mhm.
and then they would move on to other roles in the company and kind of take with them that customer empathy that was super important. So yeah, I think first thing first, hire the best people. Second thing is making sure that
That is harder to do at scale in terms of hiring folks who are going to move on to other roles in the company. It's something you can often do with a 5-person team, a 10-person team, but once you've got 170 people, you actually really need people who are customer support agents and, excited about the role of providing customer support, not necessarily all kind of coming in and hoping to jump elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it just changes over time. If you're a company that has 170 customer support agents, hopefully that company also has a lot of other places where the business is growing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think you're gonna find some portion of people love customer experience. They want to stay in it. They want to do this for their career. But there's going to be plenty of people that want to move into marketing, want to move into operations, want to move into HR, want to find other things that they can do. And just being honest with people that like, hey, this is not going to happen in 3 months. This is not going to happen in 6 months, but over time, this will probably change. So yes, the stages of the business that you're at will definitely dictate like how much movement, where people are moving to. But if it's a growing business, there should be opportunity for the best people to go wherever they want. I think the second piece is having customer friendly and agent friendly policies, procedures in place that don't create a lot of customer effort, that make it clear that we're not here to penalize the majority because of the minority of situations that are going to happen, but really make it easy to do business with you. Have the kind of agent autonomy in place to resolve things, and recognizing that like most of these minority situations that people are like writing policies for just like they end up costing the business way less than the pain that they cause the majority of people for those processes.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah, return or lost order processes are the best example. People that like fight customers on lost orders, they're like the job of an e-commerce company is to not just ship a package out of a warehouse. It's not to just get it on a truck. It's not to even get it to a person's house. It's to get it in the person's hands. And so even if a package shows delivered, if the person doesn't have the package, just like taking their word for it and replacing it for them, because the replacement for most companies, like the cost of goods sold is very low. Shipping a new package is very low. And again, like you can monitor this to make sure the person isn't abusing it, make sure this doesn't happen multiple times. You can put things in place so that doesn't happen. There are many ways to avoid that. But just taking the person's word and making it clear to them that like, hey, we default trust you. We assume positive intent. And we're gonna like replace this for you because that's gonna give you a better experience. So yeah, I could list tons of those. A lot of them are in the returns and exchanges world as well. Just really making it easy for people to do business with you. Again, same thing on the banking side, like fee recovery. Again, assuming that people have lives that they're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna miss things here and there, and not always penalizing, not trying to make $10 on this transaction because the person's gonna be worth much more down the road. And then the last is like platforms. I think a lot of companies are like really underinvest, and maybe this gets a little bit back to the AI conversation, underinvest in self-serve tools. Like consumers today like want to resolve things on their own. They don't, no one wants to contact customer support. So putting platforms, putting tools in front of people and agents to make it as easy as possible to do business with them. So you can have, every business wants to have a super low contact rate because we all recognize that like a high contact rate is a sign that like something's not going right. And so a lot of that is platform choice, ensuring that you haven't put, kind of like tools that are customer facing or agent facing that are just difficult to manage.
I forget the exact statistic, but it's very surprising the number of people that start their customer support journey on Google. Something like 40% of customers, that's where they go first. Because you're right, they don't want to contact customer support. They want Google, they want to search Google, and then Google provides an answer, likely from the company's FAQs or something like that. And so keeping those FAQs up to date is one of the most critical things you can do there, where I think a lot of companies fall down on. It's particularly a challenge with SaaS companies because they've got new versions. So you might have a forum out there that answers the question back in 2017, but that doesn't really help in 2024. So completely agree on the self-service side.
I also think just like SaaS companies with self-serve tools are probably the best example. Just knowing your customers, knowing their level of sophistication, understanding like how complex has your software gotten. At ServiceTitan, it was an ERP system. It really like could do everything for the business. And certainly when it started out, it was just like a couple core modules. And yes, people probably could self-serve a lot of that. But as the product expanded, as it got more complex, it was just like unrealistic that the same strategy of writing these like endless self-serve guides and
Yeah.
videos would be enough to enable someone on the tool. And so I think some
Yeah.
of this is recognizing that like it can't be one size fits all. There's got to be multiple mediums, and sometimes it's going to be probably a lot more high touch than it was in the beginning, but that's just what's necessary to make sure someone's successful using your product.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other specific examples within those 3 to 5 Ps that you have? Any other specific examples you can give that you felt like really moved the needle at Figs, made a difference in how customers experienced the brand?
Yeah, I think the people stuff is the most meaningful, and I think it's where actually like a lot of people fall down. Most e-commerce companies spend less than 1% of their revenue on their total customer experience. And, that's usually at the fault of people that work in customer experience. They're typically some of the lowest paid people in the organization. And they don't recognize that having brand evangelists that really are like the personification of your brand, particularly for like direct consumer e-commerce brands where they have no physical presence. There's no way they'll interact with your company in a human sense other than your customer experience team. Investing in those people, investing in making that great can be done by just like, we're not talking about spending what we spend in marketing, which is 20-30% of revenue. Literally just the difference between spending 1% and 1.5% of your revenue can make the world of difference in having people that you're proud to have interacting with your customers every single day, that care about the brand, that care about making it better, that are sharing that feedback, that are working to make it better. That's just, I mean, Figs, Inspire, Service Titan, I can think back to my career, like it was the people that made all of the difference. And it's just the caliber of people that you're willing to hire and pay versus not.
We have a client, Wild Grain, and our last podcast episode was with the co-founder and CEO, Ismail Salhi. And it's interesting you bring up marketing because he actually very intentionally put customer support within marketing. So it very intentionally sends the message that customer support is part of brand. And it really makes you look at customer support in a whole different way. That it's not just a cost center where you're really counting those basis points to try and reduce your cost. No. These are our customer relationships. And this is an investment in our brand and marketing. So I think that's a really interesting and very different approach compared with what you see usually. So you at Figs had an internal team, but you also worked with an outsourcer. One of the things we hear a lot, and not peak support, I should clarify. And one of the things we do hear a lot is, how can you outsource customer support and still maintain that quality when you don't have that control, when you've got that middle person in the middle, in between you and the customers, in between you and the agents. So talk about how you work with a BPO. How do you choose a BPO? How do you work with a BPO in a way that is really productive, really drives a good, strong partnership and makes those agents feel just as much a part of the Figs team as they would be if they were in-house?
Yeah. So starting with the BPO selection process. So yeah, I've had BPOs at every company I've worked at for I think the last 13, 14 years straight. In that selection process, I work with a consultant on the kind of BPO selection side that's really helpful, and really starts with figuring out what's most important to you. Like as you're interviewing potential partners to work with. Is it KPI delivery? Is it the location? Is it costs? Like what are the pieces that are going to be most important? Is it references? So really identifying like what success looks like for you in that partnership. And then, as you're talking with potential partners, really figuring out like how do they view success? Like what is like the culture of their organization? Are they very like cost focused? Are they very agent focused? Are they very KPI delivery focused? And so having scorecards in place, having multiple people in that interview to really like start to put quantitative numbers in place where you kind of feel like it's really difficult as you're interviewing people to really understand like what this partnership's going to look like, but understanding that like the things that are most important to you have to be most important to them. And so yeah, I think then the last thing that I would say is viewing it as a partnership and recognizing that the goals that you set for them will dictate like what they're going to focus on. I think, places or people that really focus on efficiency numbers or manage people to handle time numbers, like that's what you're going to get. You're going to get efficiency focused numbers, and they're not going to focus on quality or customer satisfaction or revenue driving activities or customer feedback. Those goals like have to be very aligned with what you're asking them to do every single day. You can't be saying that you want a great customer experience, but then like holding them to efficiency and handle time numbers above all. So I think just really going into it with like honest assessment of like what you want the partners to be, making sure that they are also aligned with that, is super important.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you. Anything else you would add? Any other key points that you wanted to communicate that we haven't discussed?
No, this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. If any of your listeners want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to shoot me a DM. I'm happy to chat more about this.
And why don't you actually talk a little bit about your consulting business and the clients you're working with and what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. So I left things about a month ago or 2 months ago, actually, at this point, to start my own consultancy. And it's to go back to one of the things I said is to really help founders and senior executives create a customer experience that they're proud of and that their customers love. And so I work with primarily e-commerce and SaaS companies on their customer experience and customer success strategies. Really working across those 3 Ps. So the people side, processes, policies, and then platforms. Helping them to improve their retention, increase referrals. If you're a founder or if you're a senior executive out there and you're wondering how to do those things, I'd love to talk to you about what that could look like.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks, Anna.
All right. Take care.
Take care.